Good morning to you, George. You know, Leah Thomas says there are two major aspects of her identity, being an elite swimmer and being trans. And yet it's her success as a trans athlete that's landed her smack in the center of a heated culture war over trans rights. And she's breaking her silence for the first time on camera as people try to balance the core values of inclusion versus fairness. She's the swimmer who created shockwaves across the country, 23-year-old Leah Thomas.
Leah Thomas pulling away.
The UPenn swimmer making history in March as the first known transgender athlete to win a Division I national title. But her athletic achievements on the women's swim team igniting fierce debate over fairness in women's sports.
It is just not fair.
When it comes to competition, it's just not a fair fight.
Throughout the controversy, Thomas has largely remained quiet until now.
I knew there would be scrutiny against me if I competed as a woman. I was prepared for that, but I also don't need anybody's permission to be myself and to do the sport that I love.
Assigned male at birth, Thomas grew up in Austin, Texas, where she says she fell in love with swimming when she was just 4. But as she grew, she says she felt increasingly disconnected to her body.
I didn't feel like I was a boy. I was like, this isn't me, this isn't who I am.
Thomas earned a spot at her Ivy League dream school, UPenn, on the men's team. But by her sophomore year, she says her gender dysphoria left her depressed and suicidal.
I was barely going to classes. I could really barely get out of bed, and I said I can't live like this anymore. And I want to be able to do things I enjoy.
Even if it might cost me my swimming career.
Yeah, and that's part of what kept me from transitioning for so long, is I wasn't sure if I could continue swimming and doing the sport that I loved.
Thomas began HRT, hormone replacement therapy, in May of her sophomore year, 2019.
The mental and emotional changes actually happened very quickly. I was feeling a lot better mentally. I was less depressed, and I lost muscle mass, and I became a lot weaker and a lot slower in the water.
After following NCAA guidelines of a year of hormone therapy to change gender categories, Thomas started her senior year on the women's team. But her success in the water was met with outrage leading up to the NCAA championships. Her critics say she jumped in the rankings between the men's and the women's team.
And there are some who look at the data and suggest that you're enjoying a competitive advantage. What do you say to that?
There's a lot of factors that go into a race and how well you do. And the biggest change for me is that I'm happy. And sophomore year, where I had my best times competing with the men, I was miserable. And so having that be lifted is incredibly relieving and allows me to put my all into training, into racing. Trans people don't transition for athletics. We transition to be happy and authentic and our true selves. Transitioning to get an advantage is not something that ever factors into our decisions.
You didn't transition to win more medals?
No.
Thomas quickly became a lightning rod. 16 of her own teammates and some of their parents wrote anonymous letters arguing Thomas posed a threat to women's sports.
The women who signed the letter anonymously said that they absolutely supported your right to transition, but they simply think it's unfair for you to compete against cisgendered women.
You can't go halfway and be like, I support trans women and trans people, but only to a certain point, where if you support trans women as women and they've met all the NCAA requirements, and then I don't know if you can really say something like that. Trans women are not a threat to women's sports.
While the science on transgender athletes is new and evolving, some medical experts say the effects of higher testosterone during male puberty may never be fully erased.
What are the physical aspects that trans women may not be able to roll back with hormone therapy?
Obviously, issues related to body size, airway size, hand size, foot size, perhaps bone density, and so forth. But I think the main thing is just the interactions of exercise training and skeletal muscle.
Are you saying that years of hormone therapy cannot put trans women in a place to compete with cisgendered women?
I think that evidence so far would suggest that periods of a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years is probably insufficient.
There is this concept of the legacy effects of testosterone, and that can't ever be zero. Should that eliminate or disqualify transgender women?
I'm not a medical expert, but there's a lot of variation among cis female athletes. There's cis women who are very tall and very muscular and have more testosterone than another cis woman, and should that then also disqualify them?
In January, the NCAA updated its transgender athlete eligibility guidelines, saying each sport's governing body could make their own rules. Later clarifying it wouldn't impose the new rules mid-season, clearing the way for Thomas to compete at the NCAAs.
It was an incredible experience to be able to fulfill that personal goal and be at that meet, as well as competing as my authentic self, was just such an amazing experience to have these things that I've been working towards for so long all come together.
Are there Olympics in your future?
It's been a goal of mine to swim at Olympic trials for a very long time, and I would love to see that through.
Now her college swimming career is over. Leah just graduated from UPenn and is getting ready for law school, perhaps a future career as a civil rights lawyer advocating for trans rights. George.